Okay, here we are. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nelson Ortega. I am a graduate student at the University of Texas Permian Basin, and I'm here today with Dr. Contreras. She is the principal at Nixon Elementary School here at El Paso, Texas. So in this interview, we're going to go on ahead and talk about equity and diversity within public education. And Dr. Contreras is a very highly respected individual and professional within her field, and she received her doctorate and her credentials from the University of Texas at El Paso. But why am I doing the formal introductions when we have her here and she is just iconic and very, very personable? So without further ado, Dr. Contreras, if you want to go on ahead and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Cindy Contreras, and yes, I do have my doctoral degree and go by Dr. Contreras in the professional world. This is year 26 in the field of education. I've been blessed to teach all elementary grades, kinder, first, second, and fourth, and 14 years of classroom experience, 12 years of administrative experience, both as an assistant principal and principal, and 2 years at the central office in charge of district and campus improvement planning and meeting those federal guidelines. Truly, my heart is at the campus where we have that opportunity to work with families and children more closely and really feel, touch, smell, hear the growth opportunity and the success of a student. So again, I am at Nixon Elementary currently in Northeast El Paso. I'm approaching my second year at that campus at the end of January, and I've been blessed to serve there. We're approximately a campus of 567 students to date. And again, we are working diligently to ensure the success of those students, also the success of our staff, watching them grow and learn as well, because we know with happy teachers and happy staff and personnel, then we in turn grow happy and contented children in the field of education. So I love what I do, passionate about what I do, and I'm right where God needs me.
Awesome. So as you can see, everyone, she is the right person to go to. Very resourceful, very supportive, and we need more educational leaders like her in this profession. So we're going to go on ahead and address these series of questions for the sake of the course, as well as for the sake of a conversation. Dr. Contreras, this is an interview, but it's just hosting a conversation. Your answers will be respected, as well as making sure that nothing is changed when I turn in the transcript for the purpose of the assignment. So my first question to you is, what are the demographics of your school? Faculty and student body, socioeconomic, ethnicity, gender, location, rural, suburban, or urban? And so how would you like to elucidate in this first question?
Okay, so I will go ahead and begin approximately, and this is current on-point data that I'm pulling for you. Currently, female population is about 46% of my population, and male is at 53%. Hispanic Latinos are 66% of our population. Other races, Asian is at 1.8%, Black African American 9%, Native American Pacific Islander at 0.66%, whites are at 16%, and two or more ethnicities are at 6%. My student programs, currently we have in regards to dyslexic, 8% of my students are dyslexic GT, another 8%. Deaf or hearing impaired, I have 0.16, and I know her name. Section 504 kiddos, we have 5% of our population. My special ed demographic is 14%. In regards to bilingual or emergent bilingual students, I have 14%. In regards to in bilingual programming itself, we have 33%. So a good percentage there. More than half of our kids are not language learners, but parents choose to put them in a bilingual program, wanting to build that bilingual trajectory for those students. Currently in my ESL population is at 0.16%, meaning those students have denied bilingual programming, but are then in a monolingual classroom setting, and we are having to support their learning of the language through a monolingual class setting. We are a Title I school, and it is a school-wide program. So all students are falling under that Title I funding. At risk, we currently have a 47% of my population is at risk. In foster care, I have 0.66%. High military population of 27%. My transfer student rate is about 5%. So that is a good, healthy number, as well as we know with open enrollment and school vouchers and everything else, you're always looking to recruit students. We no longer live just within the community of what used to be the streets of Nixon, but we also extend outside of that. I will tell you, some of those transfer students are children of students, of teachers and staff that come to our campus, which speaks highly for us as well, because again, when you're looking at a campus, you always think, would you have your own children here? Is this somewhere you want to educate your own children? So that is important as well. Economically disadvantaged kiddos, we have 71% of our population. And so that would be the students. Currently, in my teachers, we have, let's get those numbers for you. Teachers by ethnicity, I have one librarian, we have one counselor on staff, myself, an assistant principal. I have 3 interventionists, 2 curriculum, a reading and a math, and 1 behavioral interventionist. We have males, we have 2 male teachers, 41 female teachers. So definitely, yeah, and which is pretty normal for elementary school. And we really look for those opportunities for male role models for these kiddos and that opportunity to work with them. I do have a staff teacher, a PE coach, that is a male coach, so that is important also. Newer teachers, we have currently 5 brand new to the year, which I love. I love new teachers are ready to learn and try new things, but you can really work with them to build their own autonomy, yet fit in with the mission and vision of the school. 6 to 10 years of experience, we have 7, and then over 21 years of experience is 10, and then over 30 years of experience, we have 3, and the rest will fall in between there. By ethnicity, I have 3 African-American teachers, 25 Hispanic teachers, 15 white teachers, and 1 that has 2 or more races, that claims 2 or more races. So it is a diverse population. One of my favorite things about Nixon is the diversity. You're going to see a little bit of everything. We also host international students, and so they are speaking many different languages. I have about 6 this year, and so that is a blessing as well. Again, supporting the military families and these freedoms that these individuals fight for us, right? And how blessed we are to live in a country where we have that, but then in turn we take care of our military families, knowing the sacrifice they're making for us. And so they come in, and you imagine if you put me in a school in Japan and you said, leave this school tomorrow, I'd probably cry and scream and kick a little bit because I don't know the language. And so that happens often with these kiddos. But we're so blessed. Google Translate is just crazy. You can almost say anything and it comes out to what, and then as soon as you make that connection of language with those kiddos, they're like, oh, you're my friend, you know me. And I'm like, no, I don't really know what I'm saying, but we're learning it together. And so that is a blessing to Nixon as well. But when you walk in the doors, you're going to, the numbers that I shared with you, Nelson, are not numbers you see, because we're just people. We're people. Our mascot is the coyote, and we reference ourselves as the pack. And regardless of your color, size, age, we're just the pack. And pack animals take care of each other, and we're a family, and we are there for one another. I know for your particular project, some of those numbers were asked about. Do you have to consider those numbers in programming? Absolutely. Absolutely, because an economically disadvantaged child is going to have different challenges than a child who doesn't have economic questions or concerns in their daily life and maybe in a more affluent family. So those are things to be considered. Children who need support with language, students who have dyslexia or special education needs are considered in the programming. But when you walk in, you're not going to notice right away, oh, that kid must be. Those are just things we as a staff know when we look at analyze data and particular student needs.
That is amazing, and I love how you went on ahead and testified regarding, the difference between meeting the standards of, you know, any kind of programming to meet those standards and to have those numbers in, but you also find a way to, make sure that every student is treated holistically, because it's very case sensitive. Every student's background is very unique, and that's why I'm excited for this conversation, because the rest of these questions will be able to address those specifics. So thank you so much for that very, very informative answer, because it's important to address that. And as an administrator, you don't hear those kinds of answers being deciphered, numbers as opposed to what the rest of the story tells about these students. As far as my second question is concerned, Doctor, does your school district have an official definition of diversity? If so, what is it? So how would you, as far as policy is concerned, does the El Paso Independent School District have their own definition of diversity? And if not, why do you think so?
It is not something. So when you're looking at the levers, right, we have 5 levers in EPISD and things that we are focusing on. Within those 5 levers, you do recognize diversity in regards to creating equity. I think they focus more on ensuring, despite the diversity or in support of the diversity, we are going to promote equity. And again, understanding, and we are as leadership very in tune with the difference between equity and equality, right? It doesn't mean back in the day, was it fair? Did everybody get the same thing? Well, that's definitely not something that we are focused on, because what one child needs from us is not necessarily what another child is going to need from us. So it's about balancing, looking at the diversity of students, and then again, making targeted plans. And you can only imagine with 567 kiddos, the challenge in and of that, because again, what one student will need, we're going to look at equity. We're going to acknowledge the diversity within students, but to support the equity, to make sure that everybody has that equal opportunity to be successful and master the curriculum at their particular level. If I even take it a step further, it's about equity for teachers. Not all teachers need the same professional development. Not all teachers are going to need the same support from an instructional coach. Not all teachers are going to need that same thing. Not all of my hourly personnel need the same thing from me, but we make sure that we get people what they need. We meet them where they're at, and then we want to support growth, and we want to support achievement, whatever that means or looks like for that particular student. So really monitoring that growth in terms of providing an equitable opportunity.
And you really emphasized a huge point in that, in the difference between equity and equality, the difference between equity and, well, not necessarily the difference, but the inclusion part of equity within diversity, and how that is the main focus of the school district. And so I love how you express that very graciously, because it's very true. If we look at it from a different perspective through a district employee, like you said, not every teacher is going to need the same instructional support personnel training as opposed to another teacher or another admin. So that I feel like that's a very important thing to make as well. What does it
Specifically,
mean?
just a second. Specifically, sorry, they title it equity by design. So making sure that you've designed a system where it's going to look different, right? And even as a principal, some principals today have a mentor and some don't, and some are the mentee, and some are the mentor, and some are just living the dream and doing the job. So again, everybody has that opportunity to have that support from the highest of us, from our superintendent, who is a newer superintendent and has her circle of mentors through local superintendents, and then all the way down to our pre-K students.
Thank you so much for explaining that, because that's again, like we forget on how all of us are learning as we go. And as many respected educators in the field, the one true educator to educate us is experience. And you know that more than I do regarding in your profession. What does it mean for you to have a commitment to diversity? Not necessarily the school or school district's commitment, but to you as an educational leader within your campus.
I think it means an awareness of the whole person and the whole child. Again, gone are the days when that was a home problem and now this is a school problem, or that is I do worry about my kids that I've shared multiple times with my staff. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And I have the Christmas outfits for every day in December because I'm an elementary principal and it's what we do. But we have to remember that for some, they're cold and they don't have the heater at home and they're dreading the break coming because there's not going to be food to eat. And the things that we so take for granted, others don't have. I met with a family recently for Thanksgiving. On the table was ramen and tuna. Like that's all they had. And so I have a responsibility to make sure that basic needs are met. And that wasn't always the case. That used to be a very separate problem where I could tell you, go to this organization and now you'll have to move on and figure it out. Today I have a military family life counselor on staff. I have your regular campus counselor or your school counselor that provides guidance lessons, but I also have a focus on the family's counselor, and that's somebody that really can make sure that we get those connections of needs met. So to me personally, diversity is knowing, and it's going to be relational, right? Because it's easier to find out some things about kids, one, because they're just blatantly honest. We don't have, we're going to say we don't have, because I didn't know that was a strange thing. Adults are a little more challenging because of pride, because of stereotypes, because people might shun me or look differently at me. So creating a safe space to truly know where people are at and what they are needing, and then again to find a way to meet those needs, to go back to the core of what it is and what is that academic achievement, right? I'm wanting because knowledge is power. The more I know, the more I can do, and that goes for everybody, from an hourly employee that may not have that degree or that life experience at this point, all the way up to a read employee, but really, where can we meet you and know you more personally so that we can continue to grow together, and then going back to the core of for students, for the students we serve.
And it's a very, it's a very sensitive subject, because that used to be the case. Through the research and testaments that I have heard and read, that it was a separate issue. Now schools have become, in a sense, community-based organizations, in collaboration with other community centers to address a multifaceted dilemma that is very case sensitive. And so your expression of diversity is very, very personal as well. You and I being in a very dense Latino background, Latino community, we see in a sense ourselves in these kiddos, in these families. So it's also it's also a personal testimony for what we do as
Mhm.
educators. So I really do appreciate your answer for that question. Um, and speaking of which, how have you demonstrated that commitment to diversity at your campus?
So there's multiple things that we do. We do have check-in, check-out where we meet with particular students that have an extra need, and those of us that are not tied to a classroom are responsible to really have a mentor-mentee relationship with those kiddos. Second semester, I'm going to take my fifth grade girls, and we have these groups, what we call a 4-week program of lady leaders. What it is to be a girl and to grow into a woman as we transition from, I'm a little kid at elementary school to now I'm going into the middle school and helping to support them. I'm teaching about women really empowering other women and what does that look like, sound like, smell like. We also have what we call collaboration conversations. I meet with each teacher for 30 minutes, my whole leadership team, and we go student by student because nobody's going to get left behind. And I know that sounds so cliche, but really nobody's going to get left behind. We're going to go student by student, and what does this kiddo need? How are the academics? How's behavior? How's attendance? Is there anything else that we need to do as a team to support this student? Let's look at STAR if they've taken it multiple times. Let's look at their map testing. So we really hone down through collaboration and conversations. We might identify some students who are in need of a tier 2 intervention, such as MTSS and that support. So we start to build that support as well. Currently, I have 3 self-contained classrooms at my campus, and so there are some specific needs to our behavioral units, and one is an AIM unit, a modified instruction unit, and again, they're going to need something different. There's a lot. I have SPED meeting once a month after school because I just need to meet with that department because they have specific needs. We have front office meetings. I meet with my counselors as a team once a month. What I do differently, I think, Nelson, as I describe it to you, is access to me. Why? Because I understand the seat that I sit in. And more often than not, people are going to say, gosh, I really need to ask her. I really need to say, and she just looks so busy. She's way too busy. And I say, I'm never too busy. The door is open. Come on by. But a lot of times if you go by, I'm not even there because I'm in the classrooms and I'm working with kiddos and I'm out advocating for my school, right? And doing things for the kiddos on our campus. So really creating access where we can sit down and have conversations, where those teams are helping me build agendas for what those meetings topics need to be, and then finding ways to support them. I work real hard to sit in PLCs once a week, and I don't drive that conversation. I'm an attendee, and I go in because I want to listen to the conversations to see what my students and teachers are needing. So to for me to support diversity is to make myself accessible and really be a listener, so that I'm hearing what those needs are, and then to make sure that I hold the dialogue. Yeah, am I understanding this correctly? And then what can we do in turn to support that need?
Beautiful. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but that was just a very, very honest and beautiful answer because, again, I've met wonderful administrators, but not many of them collectively, not any of them, not every one of them tackle a situation or a campus in the collective unit. So Dr. C, I really do appreciate that. You mentioned a really great point about access, and you're actually bringing up the next question. What do you see as the most challenging aspects of an increasingly diverse academic community? You talked about access, and as being one of the opportunities as well. You also stated that it could be a challenge because of everyone's background being case sensitive. So, what are the most challenging aspects of an increasingly diverse academic community? And you could elaborate more on the access and excellence of that opportunity.
I think definitely the challenge is, okay, so now you create these learning paths, right? Or we create these paths for individual students, whether it's social emotional, whether it's behavioral, whether it's academic. But when you look at budget expenditures, it's very challenging to say, okay, but these 3 kids just need this. How in the world am I going to get just that program for those 3 kids? So that becomes challenging, and sometimes it's not feasible, right? Nothing is more disappointing than to have to say, no, we can't do that right now. There was a program, 8 students from AIM wanted at one time, and you just couldn't get a site license for 8 manageable, and with the amount of time that we had left in the school year, it just was not feasible. So when your no is not now, but you know the urgency is, I need it now, that becomes challenging. Identifying ways to meet the diverse needs, because many phone calls are going to be made. I get emails all the time. We are a scientifically based research opportunity through this programming, and everybody thinks they have the fix, right? And it's not that programs aren't great, but a program won't necessarily know the story or the need. I'll give you an example. There are children who are tested and do not qualify for special education, but we know that academically they're low, but their cognitive ability is low, their academic achievement is low, and they're just going to be what we reference as that slow learner. Okay, so they don't qualify for special education. They are now a slow learner in a general education classroom, but I still have to ensure growth. Okay, I need something special just for that group of kids. And so we've tried to create an intensive intervention time, which we now have 45 minutes a day of WIN time where those kiddos can get some intervention. I could be a 3rd grade student or a 4th grade student, but during my WIN time, I have 1st grade instruction because there are things that it's really hard for me to grasp. And if I don't find an opportunity for that kid to feel successful, we know long-term trajectory, you'll drop out or you'll make because you haven't found that the reason that academics can be successful for you, right? Or you make another option that might not suit you in the long term, because we know now even your minimum wage job is going to ask you to have a high school diploma. And so helping students to understand and find a way for them to be successful. So the challenge is definitely diversity at large. And can you really have 567 paths, right? And then with
Right.
math, can I really have 80 paths to achievement? It's not always easy. The resources aren't always there. And there are times you have to humble yourself and look outside of yourself. I will tell you, at Thanksgiving, there was a family, after I was more curious and worried about attendance and like, what is going on here? And did a home visit, and they didn't even have a stove. And so you just thought, well, there's not even going to be, how do you Thanksgiving without all that? So then you had to go to your partners in education and work your magic and advocate for people. And then, is this residence safe to have a stove inside of it? I mean, that took work beyond my knowledge. Those are not things that I am, but I have good partners in education and resources to make those kind of things possible, and then working through my counselors and lists of food pantries, where, okay, now you have the proper utensils to make meals, but where do you get access to the meals, right? While we're not here. And so the answers aren't always easy or there, but not giving up and being determined, and knowing that, okay, some things are just going to take some more time, but we don't forget.
So certainly that commitment, that grit
Mhm.
is very essential, because through all that uncertainty, you know, you just have to do your best and take the risks in making sure that, you know, not everyone's going to be satisfied with being told no.
Mhm.
But you also are still extending your hand and say, we don't have this at the moment, or we can't move forward with this resource. However, this is what we can do, plan A, plan B, C, all the way
Mhm.
to plan Z
Right.
for all we know.
Mhm.
And you actually, and I love how you talked about that, because the next question was, what steps have you taken or planned to take to meet such challenges? And you touched on that. You know, you talked about the partners of education. You talked about doing community outreach, with programs and resources that are beyond your knowledge, as you said. Um, so that's very important, because it goes back to the first answers that we have talked about. Like, it's no longer a separate issue; it's multifaceted. And you know, schools have become, you know, for our kids. So it's a really, talk about diversity. It's also a diverse challenge in
Mhm.
of itself. Um, so you graciously answered that next question. The next question that I have here: do you feel that students benefit when there is racial, ethnic, LGBTQ plus, and gender diversity in the faculty? And you could talk about representation. You could also talk about culturally relevant pedagogy, or anything that you might have seen during your graduate or even now in your respected field. Do you feel that students benefit from from this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot tell anyone how what happens in the privacy of your home, right? How every house is different, and kiddos come to us, with things that they've learned from home, and that's fine and good, and you have to acknowledge, that, and gracias a Dios they have a home and they have, families that are teaching them whatever those values and what is maybe considered right or wrong, um, uh, right from wrong, but children need to, and I do believe this generation has a high sense of of wanting everybody to belong, right? Everybody is, like I said, when we instill, we are the pack. Um, we're the pack, all of us, right? Um, and it is, interesting, and uh, it's okay, to have at this time of year the different, uh, winter celebrations, and to acknowledge that and to understand that, uh, the little boy that comes to fifth grade with his nails polished and people are besides themselves, that, that has happened, that is okay. That is not, and because when the other students are caught off by that, and the little boy goes home disappointed, um, with that, and the mother comes asking, did I do it wrong? Did I? Not at all. Not at all. We're not used to boys coming with nail polish, um, but it's okay. If in your house you said that was okay, that's okay, and let's not be afraid of something that is different. So in that particular circumstance, I had to make it very clear, and this is going to be kind of raw, um, but we were not talking about sexual preference. How that gets wrapped in to a conversation of a 11, 12-year-old, to me, that's just disgusting. That has nothing to do with, I don't go around discussing my personal sexual preference with anybody. That's nobody's business. That's between me and my husband, and we deal with our things. So why do we turn those kind of diverse experiences into something that is so inappropriate for that setting? The fact, like I told you, my international students, the opportunities they have just through lunch, right? They bring different food, and kiddos are like, "Oh my, what's that all about?" And you see them trading the bean burrito for whatever they have, and because kids just want to know about that, like, what does that taste like, right? And so, really creating a safe space for whatever those differences are. We'll go back to, there was a time when kids could not come to the school with their hair colored, right? Because that was thought of, it's so distracting to the environment. It's, well, if you allow it to be, right? If the lesson is that unengaging, that all we can focus on is Susie's red and blue striped hair, you're right, it is going to be that distracting. Personally, you can ask any of my children, they're not allowed to paint their hair till they're out of high school, but that is our personal family. That's in my house. But hey, in the fifth grade, if your parents let you, knock yourself out, and no, that's not going to be the center of a fifth grade lesson. We're just not going to talk about that, and we're going to move on. So the right of choice to express yourself how you want to, and the right to be who you are, even if that's not something you choose. My skin is so dark, and I am African American, and ebony is the skin color that I carry. And perhaps another child hasn't seen that, right? Or hasn't been exposed to that. When you see somebody with the color of ebony skin, and it's so soft, and it looked like, golly, you do want to like touch and say, wow, because that's not a part of our Hispanic culture. I don't see that. When you hear the person that rolls that R so beautifully when they speak Spanish, that is interesting to you, and you're going to see the other student, I want to sound like that. And those are curiosities that are good, and we have to learn to truly love one another in a community, and to accept one another. And they're going to be things that perhaps are more choice driven or a part of who you are, that can be more controversial. Gracias a Dios, I'm still at elementary school and I stay there for a reason. And in those regards, more often than not, I try to divert then that conversation to the appropriateness of grade school, right? I don't like my children in grade school to be wearing makeup. I just think that's a grown-up girl thing to do. But I don't tell them that it's not allowed either. I just, in time that'll come, they're so beautiful how they are. Like, you don't need that. Like, I'll go to school without makeup and tell them, this is why I wear this. Like, do you see these wrinkles? Do you see these bags under these eyes? Porque ya está viejita. And I'm trying not to look tired. But your natural beauty is amazing, and to be comfortable in your skin. And like I told you, when I meet with those girls and we talk about those kind of things, don't be in a rush. It'll come. And again, the diversity is beautiful, and I'm glad that schools are a safe place. And if we have to have the restroom that has a boy and a girl on it, then we do that, and that's okay. And we're going to guard the soul and the heart and the safety of being different, and we're going to allow students and people to be curious about the difference. It's not a bad thing to question, like I said, the ebony skin. Oh my goodness, we don't see that a lot, right? And your teeth look so white. next to the color of your skin. And that might catch somebody off, right? But it's not disrespectful. I'm just communicating what I observe. And so we make sure that through our books of the month, through different conversations that we have, that we create that safe space. And in our explorations of diversity, if somebody is offended, we also, or feels like, you know what, I don't want to talk about that, right? When the little boy came and people were shocked at the colored nails, and when he says, you know what, I'm just not comfortable talking about that, we had to respect that too, because you all already made the funny face. Like, you messed it up for yourself if you wanted to talk about it, because you made the funny face and now that made him feel uncomfortable. So we're not going to be able to talk about that right now. But I didn't see on the nail polish bottle where it said boys or girls. Like, I don't remember that. And then the kids kind of looked at me like, huh? I'm like, yeah, I didn't see that. Like, I don't know why we feel like that. I don't know. It's the society we live in is real and relevant, and we have to be accepting of each other's differences.
It's you. It's again a very multifaceted answer to a very multifaceted question, and I loved how you really touched on every single topic regarding, um, you know, relevancy and representation, and the freedom of choice to express your authentic self and everything. And it starts in the home, but how you carry it forward outside of your home is also independent and interdependent. Because we all thrive in the community of belonging and acceptance, like you said. And you actually, you're really hitting the nail on the head here, because you touched base on the next question. How have or will you how have or will you your teaching how has your teaching um meet different culture and learning styles of your students? Or in this case, since you are an administrator, Dr. Contreras, how have your teachers and counselors adapted their teaching and counseling to meet the cultures and learning styles of their students? What steps have you all have taken as a team to address these issues?
We work closely, for example, with my international students, we work closely with Connecting Languages, our dual language department, because again, in our area, as you said, the majority are Spanish speaking, usually coming from Mexico. But you'll see right now, like I said, with our international students or just your migrant students that are coming, right? We have to have resources that are ready and relevant to them, because that gives them the sense of belonging. I do belong here, and understand things about me. I think so. We work closely with them in regards to resources. We do spend time with those families, wanting to know and understand. I have no idea what eye contact means in your community. And I would hate for a teacher to call your child over and it's a disrespect in your community to make direct eye contact, and the teacher feeling like, how come you never look at me when I'm talking to you? So we have to get to know those families and really understand cultural differences. We have to be sensitive to those cultural differences, more so at these times, holiday season. We have to, it's going to go back, a lot of it, Nelson, goes back to relationships, right? We have to build relationships. We have to find resources to meet those needs. So what do? We take time. We sit with people. As I shared with you, I have 2 self-contained sections that are behavioral units. Many of these children, a 7-year-old that's emotionally disturbed. And if you were to see this kiddo in the grocery store throwing a fit, cursing at their parents, kicking, and you would be caught off guard and you would think one of two things. This is a bad child, whatever that means, I don't know, but that's your gut instinct, or the lack of parenting skills on behalf of the parent, or the caretaker, when the truth is, the child has a real diagnosis of oppositional defiant, emotionally disturbed. And again, some may say, oh, back in the day, that never happened. You're just making up labels, or I see it, I live it. I have 2 sections on my campus. It's real. It's real. And so we have to be very cautious, because these kids are now in the self-contained section, because the behaviors are so egregious that somebody can get hurt physically. But I also want them to be a part of the path. And I also strive, as they go through this, to build emotional control for them and accountability, because my goal is, by the time they get to that 4th and 5th grade, they are acclimated and mainstreamed into some gen ed courses, whatever is their strong suit academically. I want them to be a part of the student council. I want them to have those other opportunities, but they have to learn that self control, and it takes years. And somewhere in there, again, they have to have academics, right? So really, it's about building relationships, and so that you can meet those varied needs.
Beautiful. And because again, I love how you are going on ahead and explaining that, because it does lead to the next question of what efforts have you made or have been involved with to foster multicultural understandings and cultural competence? And you just went on ahead and answered for 2 questions, which is just amazing. Like, I love it. I love it. No, really, I do, because it as important as these questions are, they're not separate. They're all tied in together. And you talked about hosting these conversations, and you talked about essentially reaching them before teaching them, and making sure that we're reaching them. And I love the examples that you brought up about the deficit perspective. You have the deficit perspective of if a child's misbehaving or acting out, in the grocery store, for example, all of us have that implicit bias of, that child is, it's just a bad child, whatever that means, like you said, or, the parent is lacking, parental skills, discipline, when in reality, we don't know what that child goes through. We don't know what goes through their minds. We see what they express cognitively. We see that they struggle with comprehension, but we don't know a lot of the mental health factors. And a lot of the times they don't know themselves. They can't communicate it as we can. If we have a hard time communicating as neurotypical individuals, something that is traumatic or something that is burdensome, imagine a child who doesn't have any other choice but to bite or to hit.
Exactly. And I know, I will tell you, 85%, 90% of that population has one, if not both, parents incarcerated. And so that adds to these perhaps behavioral responses. I don't know. I'm never going to be able to tell a child I know what that feels like. Personally, in our family, my husband volunteers time at our local prisons, working with those men, and works to help and provide guidance and mentorship, because we find it as that's and just a personal in our family, an area of community that needs us. We have to stop this prison to school pipeline, and so we do everything we can, right? And I'm never going to be able to, if you have a chemical imbalance, and the anger is so deep seated and a parent is in prison, I don't know. I'll never know what that feels like, as my parents didn't have that experience. So I can't say I'll understand it, but I can be here for you and help you move through that.
No, I agree, and thank you for sharing that that personal testament with what you and your husband do, especially your husband volunteering in that, because it is statistically, it is an unfortunate um, circumstance for many. You know, it's political,
Mhm.
unfortunately, in many ways, because as someone like myself who works with students, who's worked as an aide for a self-contained unit, these are students. Yes, it starts small, but it builds up from there. And behavior influences behavior. And one of the things that we told parents is that we're trying to think long term here. Should the student have an aggressive meltdown in public,
Mhm.
law enforcement, or any kind of public servant who may not have an understanding of these behaviors and whatnot, it there's going to be so much miscommunication, and there's going to be an unfortunate events that we need better training and better professional assistance for all of us to de-escalate the situation, as well as making sure that we are alleviating any misconceptions that we have in regards to this. So thank you for sharing that. I really do appreciate that. Um, this next question, Doctor, uh, what are some of the literacy challenges that are faced by students from diverse backgrounds, particularly in your campus, or maybe as in general as a whole from what you have researched and have experienced?
Oh, I do think relevant, your economically disadvantaged students have less opportunity to background knowledge. They're not going to, that is true. They don't, you should see the look on a student's face that has never been to the zoo, that has never gone to our planetarium that's here in our school district, that has never gone to a pumpkin patch, that has never seen a real Border Patrol individual on career day. So we're building background knowledge and experience that a more affluent family travels abroad and they go to California and they surf and they um, have a different level of conversation and are exposed to more academic vocabulary, perhaps. And not that that's always the case. I know personally, my father had a high school diploma, and he would say, he would teach us words, and he was very intentional. And he would say, instead of thirsty, you say parched. You feel parched. And okay, so I mean, we were little and we just went with it. Okay. Later on, when I was then dating my husband, and I said, I'm parched. What the heck's wrong with you? I was like, oh, I'm thirsty. I need something to drink. And it wasn't until later in life that I used what was more tier 2 or tier 3 vocabulary, but because my dad was intentional to learn some words, and then I would use them in public later. And people thought, oh, she's so smart. I'm not smart. I just am an old man who would go out of his way to learn these words. And it wasn't because it was about exposure, right? And that's what he taught us, because in his mind, how you sounded then equivalated your quote unquote smartness. Smart people spoke this way. So having said that, these kiddos come, you're economically disadvantaged kiddos, kiddos coming from closer to that poverty line and living that perhaps with one parent, or perhaps with two parents who still barely make it and work. They're not going to have the exposure or the opportunity to exposure, and so equaling the playing field for them. I know we were just talking the other day with our pre-K kiddos, because there was an assessment and they show them pictures, and time and again when they showed the picture of the light switch, they reference it as light, but really it's a switch, and the switch turns on the source of light, but the children did not use the word switch, right? Or light switch. They used this is light. Well, technically, no, the energy that comes from the bulb is the light. And so I'm helping people understand that. The other thing I tell my teachers too is, as educators, because we're exposed to all these teaks, right? And we're bombarded with, you have to teach these 200, and they say it's approximately 297 teaks a year per grade level. So which equivalates to 0.7 master, 0.7 teaks per, I believe they said 30 to 45 seconds of the given minutes a child is in school. Okay, that's like crazy. Like, who is really going to do that? So you're trying to, as I say, fit 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. And so we're trying to teach you all these things. But when you come without, how do we help you to foster that lack of access to opportunity and those basic things that we see? So yes, we try field trips, we try guest speakers, we are cautious about the verbiage that we use when we speak to kids. I love when kids come to my office for a discipline issue. And of course, they have that, oh no, I shouldn't be here. And then as I just sit down and have conversations with us, when I ask, so did you feel infuriated, or were you disappointed? Were you more disappointed with your friend, or were you infuriated? And then they look at me and, what does that mean? Okay, let's talk about that. Let's go ahead and talk about what these two words mean. And then you can tell me which of those two you were feeling more of, because it's still an opportunity to teach language, to teach not only to identify feelings, but to expose them to other ways besides screaming, no, don't do that, right? So again, exposure and the lack of exposure for especially children who don't have that opportunity, because we're barely getting food on the table and making our basic life needs met.
Thank you so much for that, Doctor. What supports are in place to address the varied needs of students?
So definitely we have our funding, right? You have Title I and Title III funding. That's where we're going to get those, be able to access those resources. We have, as I told you, 3 different counselors on board that are helping to meet to those needs. Then we expose students to things and opportunities that they might not have otherwise had through career days, and who we pick to come there and talk to our kiddos. And then sometimes it comes down to, I know right now, like our PTO, they just did that angel tree for kiddos that were identified who aren't going to have a Christmas, and now they are. So those are great things. To Thanksgiving, we collected meals for our kiddos and those families we know that need it. What else do we do? Really connecting families with those resources. This is the first year we have a focus on the families counselor. And so she connects people to, if they're going through UBH for behavioral issues, she works with home hospitals, getting parents and families through those kind of times. She also, with her is where I go to get, okay, give me the list of the food pantries that are open this week. Give me the list of those opportunities. We do our own in-house after school tutoring and after school snacks for kiddos that may not have a dinner meal that evening. We've opened our campus to intramurals after school. Some of those kids are like me, not 1 ounce of athletic ability inside your body. That would be me. But they're staying for the volleyball at intramurals just so they can get a snack. Right. And that would have been me too, right? I just want that peanut butter and jelly after school. And so we let them and understand that also. You become the Batgirl like that.
Oh, I love that. You touched on this next question ties into the previous questions here. And again, I thank you for taking time out of your your day off, Doctor, to address these very multifaceted questions, because I know they're lengthy, but I really do appreciate your knowledge and expertise. But the next one is, how do you ensure equality of literacy for all students? Consider race, ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomic diversity. And you talked a lot about exposure. You talked a lot about exposure, and you talked a lot about how the supports of one student may not be the same kind of need for another student. And, you and your staff try to diversify, those kinds of supports. What else do you do to ensure equity of literacy for all students of all backgrounds?
Unfortunately, this school year, they have changed all of our curriculum around. So we have 4 new programs, Eureka Math, Amplify for Social Studies Weekly, and STEM School. I can't tell you I'm 100% familiar with all of that curriculum, as we're still working through it. I don't know. You're not going to have Lon Popo, and you're not going to have like all those stories that are rich in. Amplify is big on content connectedness. But I haven't seen, in my experience thus far, the diversity in literature there. So what do I do, right? How do I fill that hole? Well, one, we still do the old school book of the month. And so we're very cautious when we pick those about what do we want children to be exposed to. And I would say too, I think our library is a great source of the opportunity to expose children to reading and literature that is diverse. To kiddos, there is nothing. The Little Mermaid, she came out this year as an African American. Who would have thought? There's nothing richer for a student than to see themselves inside of a book. And it's a happy ending. It's a good thing. It's good to be these things, and we want children to be able to see that. I think even when we were going back to the beginning of our questions, and we talked about how many males teachers are there, because I want my boys to see this is something you can do, right? Back in the day, most principals were males. They weren't 5 feet little women walking around with the title of doctor. But you can do this too. And so you're wanting kiddos to look at themselves, and with whatever they identify as, to see that in our environment, to see that in their teachers and caretakers, to see that in literature, to see that in the things and resources they're exposed to make that connection and say, so and so did, and I can too.
Love that. And well, do you find that students from different cultural backgrounds have different learning needs? And if yes, how do you address these needs? And again, you touched so much on that, and you in a sense, again, you answered the question with the other question. Which is amazing. Like, if anything, it makes the conversation much more fruitful, because you mentioned earlier that you see it, you live it every day, you see it from one side of not just on the side of your desk in your office, but you go into the classrooms and you make these personal approaches to the teachers and to the students. And as far as learning needs are concerned, specifically for SPED population, you touched on international students. How are their learning needs? We can even expand on this question. How are their learning needs and cultural needs, and many of them maybe in SPED, differ from students who are not international, students who are here in the U.S.? Have you noticed a difference between those learning needs?
Most students have a foundation of they do come with schooling. It just looks very different than what it looks like here. So it's a matter of understanding. So, for example, I had a kindergartner last year that just was having a fit in the afternoon. Well, then after speaking to the parent, they had only gone to a half day program. So, yeah, by the time of the afternoon, the kid would just wanted to say or verbalize, I'm freaking tired. Like, this is a long day. So, then us understanding that and whether right or wrong, I slowly expanded his day, and mom would come and pick him up. And yes, it would kick my butt in attendance rates. But okay, today you only have to go an hour after lunch. Like, that's all. Like, and then they'd come pick him up early. And yes, I was going to pay for it on the attendance end, but I had to build his longevity because the whole afternoon he was just miserable, right? So the class couldn't learn, and he wasn't learning. And um, so you look at those different needs, you look at content area in a different country can be approached to a different capacity. Amplify right now is teaching letter by sound, and they're not naming the letters. So we think that's like completely foreign, right? When M is M is M. But now kids are supposed to see it and they say, that's a what? Why would we do that? But that would be very different for a student coming from a different culture or place. My SPED population, making sure that we understand the ability. It is hard at times we know that there's this infamous state assessment. And again, that's a whole political a realm that I'm not going to get into right now. It is not appropriate, but it's very challenging for our children. It's a measure of what our campuses are doing. And so understanding that because the content and the form in which children are tested is changing and the passing expectations are changing, and not wanting my SPED population students to feel defeated. I'm very cognizant on growth measure, right? So we take maps at the beginning of the year, and then I'm going to take it at the middle of the year. All of my students have student trackers. They're looking at they're comparing unit assessments. They participate in things like extra math or other programs where they can measure growth, because I can't be a one size fits all of what academic success looks like. And so I have to find a pocket. Even I'll go as far to say is, even if it's the FitGram, right? That has nothing to do with cognitive ability. But buddy, you made more push-ups in the middle of the year than you had at the beginning of the year. I am going to celebrate that like it is the bee's knees, because I want my kiddos to leave understanding that they have made progress somewhere. And so, although you may have different cognitive abilities and you may have something that is different for your learning approach, can we all grow? Yes. And are we measuring that growth? Do we hope for on grade level success for all students? Absolutely, because when they're not on grade level, it only becomes more challenging for them. But if we can show them how close they are to getting there while celebrating the growth, then that's what we're going to do.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I lost track because I was so into what you were answering. Let's see. Okay, learning needs. Okay, we addressed that one. Thank you so much for answering that. What efforts have has your school district made to help achieve a more diverse faculty and staff? And if those efforts have not been met, what is your personal take on these measures?
I'm going to be honest to tell you, Nelson, I've never heard anything about that. And I think that perhaps people are more leery to even have those conversations because you're afraid that it'll backfire you on the other way. If I said I need more men on my campus, oh my gosh, she only goes out to hire men. Because we're just so shallow out, right? We really are. Um, uh, like you can't, right, without then being um, somehow biased in an interview that I'm looking for a certain population that I need to increase on a campus. So yeah, at my level, it's not really spoken at the level of central office or district with the other district personnel. That is not something as so that it's not unfair hiring practices aren't perceived or somebody's to say something silly. And we're looking at the qualifications of the person. Personally, yeah, you do think about the diversity. Like I said, when I hire, I do think about my kids and the connections, right? It's not only are you a good applicant, you might be, I can interview from a pool and you might be a very qualified, great applicant, but are you a fit for Nixon? It's a constant volley between the two things. Are you good for the pack? I like smart people. I love smart people. That's fun. They push me. But you may be a great candidate with all the appropriate responses to those questions. But you are good. Are you a good fit for the pack? And then I also look at what is the student population you're going to be working with on the daily, and how are those kiddos going to respond to you? Because though again, relationship is huge. Kids work for you a lot of the times. Not understanding yet, they're still elementary school children. They don't understand the value of education. So really they're working to please you, and they'll whatever you say the sky is green. Well, then the sky is green. We're elementary school and I love you and you smell good and you're super nice to me and you always have a hug, and darn it, every time I come you give me breakfast. So yeah, whatever you say, it must be true, because they're little still and we still live in elementary school. And so if they're going to believe anything you say, I have to remember that person now sits as a role model in that kid's life, right? And I can tell you, I can name the teacher. Mrs. Science in third grade, Mrs. Werewolf and Mrs. Tully were my fourth grade team teachers. And then I had Mr. Gutierrez in fifth grade. Those were the people I needed along my trajectory of grade school. Mr. Reinhardt and his freshman Latin. And I can tell you, these are the people that set the path. The content I learned to this day, I might not be able to tell you all the content, but the relationships that I had, and they made me want to learn and know more.
That is a very, very personal approach that you have taken, and I really do much appreciate that. Because the next question also elaborates like of the hiring and the applicant and the process of getting to know a candidate's background. If your school district has not directly been involved in achieving a more diverse faculty and staff, how might it plan to achieve this objective? Have you seen any differences within that, or it's the same answer that you have beautifully expressed with the first question?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think like even in what department would that come through. You again, all hiring goes through employee relations, goes through that HR employee relations department. And I don't know, again, having some central office experience, I don't know how that conversation would come to pass. And again, I'm just trying to think, like, would that start with our elementary HR personnel? Would that start with, I don't know. I don't know where that conversation would begin. At the campus level. The other thing that we do is I don't hire in isolation, right? I could if I wanted to, because we are site-based managed and just sit down and interview people, but I always have my assistant principal. I try to have another leadership individual in there with me. At times, I've tried to have a front office staff person in there because they're going to have to work with this individual also. And then I try to have somebody from that grade level be a part of that conversation, because that's going to be more of a marriage than it is to me. They have to work together all the time. So really giving voice to others who will be working with that person, I think, is a critical component in that hiring process as well.
Thank you, Doctor. We are on number 13, almost to 20. I promise we're almost done with this. Again, I appreciate your time and effort. Thank you. What would you do to motivate and engage students, faculty, and staff in learning varied perspectives of diversity, inclusion, and social justice?
Well, we have to plan the conversation, right? First of all, you have to teach people how to communicate. So that has to be, I mean, with more, you have to build collaborative learning environments. You really do. You have to teach good listening skills. You have to teach turn taking. You have to teach dialogue. It doesn't happen. I know a lot of times kids are working in partners, and you hear my teachers, because I tell them all the time, talking about, don't give them the answer, you're discussing the answer, right? Because we say, do group work, do partner work, and did the 5 right here. No, like, let's talk about where we got to that answer from. So you have to teach that. And then we're going to start perhaps with things that are like, what is better, chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream? Okay, like, it's not you can't take offense to that. And then eventually you're going to, why you feel that is the better. And we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to respect that. Then you also then go to explore cultural or learning differences, right? Like, I know I have kiddos that leave to DRD, then later in the day they go to resource, and then the kid that's always in classes, I want to go somewhere. Why? Because he's tired of Mrs. So-and-so. Like, he's had enough. Like, I want to be like so-and-so, and they get to go everywhere. So then having those conversations and validating to kiddos that's what he needs, and perhaps you can't go, but I can get you a pull-out person, right? So you have a check-in and a check-out person, or I can get you on Fridays. I have literacy first, so I have parents that come in and read with kiddos in the library, and some of those books are in Spanish, and they just read for pleasure. And we taught parents some guiding comprehension questions, because it's still different than a bedtime story, right? Even then, parents aren't sure what we talk about. I don't know to ask you anything. A bedtime story is still huge. So that doesn't happen anymore. So if you're doing that, parents, kudos to you. Just that is huge in and of itself. But then let's tie the comprehension to it, right? So really creating safe spaces to have conversations. And I think the bottom line is going to always, always, always go back to relationships and respecting the diversity of the different cultures and what we bring to one another, and the positivity from that. Teach me something. We do have a small Jewish population on our campus, and if you've never had the opportunity or exposure to that, it's amazing, right? It's you get invited to Seder, and you get to sit at that table and really understand what that means. For me, that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, yes, I read this in the Old Testament all the time. Oh my goodness, this is still happening, because as Christians, we don't do that anymore. But you get invited to the Seder table and you're in awe that, holy moly, it's 2023 and people are still doing what I read in the Old Testament, right? Because it's not old and dead, it's old and alive. People are still practicing this. So really embracing that opportunity, and then having kids come to share, This is a part of who and what I am with pride. These are things I'm very proud of, and it looks different than your house or your life.
Talk about motivation. That was a very motivating and encouraging answer, Doctor. Thank you for that. This next question is very personal at the same time with your profession. Well, all of them are in a sense, but this one specifically, discuss a time when you contributed to diversity, inclusion, and pluralism at your school district or at your campus.
Mhm. Uh, I think in unapologetically being your authentic self. You, like I shared with you earlier, uh, our personal family has a real calling to individuals with incarcerated people in their lives and what that means as a society and as a system. And so I have shared that with my staff. When my husband first asked to work in the prisons, to volunteer there, my answer was no. That's not happening. That is not safe. And there is no way I'm going to get through an evening knowing you're in prison and they take your phones away when you go in there. Like, that's where it's not going down like that. And gracias a Dios, he was respectful and said, okay. A year later, it's really laying on my heart. And I'm watching these kids that I serve, and I'm like, okay. So we finally came to a middle ground and agreed. And I found a way we're not changing the world, but we're supporting where we can in the corners of the world that we are living in, to help students and families through these things. So we built some awareness there. Uh, I think it goes back to being your authentic selves. I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. My youngest sister is a spitting image of me, but she is all tomboy, 100% athlete of the year. She's going to win it, spin it. Yep. So it's just me in a sports version. I don't think she ever wears dresses. She doesn't do that. Um, uh, she is openly homosexual and has a life partner that she shared her life with, and she comes to be a part of our school things. And because I have a niece there with me that we lost her mother last year, and so my other sister, and so we all are a part of this thing called education. And so it's just being authentically true to who and what you are. And I don't see it as different, but sometimes you see the looks on people's faces. But we mush forward through it, and we love each other through it, and we are just our authentic selves. And later on, I will tell you through that experience, I was invited to a colleague's wedding as she was going to marry her life partner because, hey, Dr. C thinks that's like, it's just norm. Yeah, you're a person and you love, and it's multifaceted and colored. You love as much as I love the person I share my life with. And so again, going back to relationships, you build relationships so that people are comfortable in their skin and authentic to themselves. But you have to be able to share those things about yourself. I will also share that when I came home to the dinner table and shared about the little boy with painted nails, my husband wasn't having that. That's ridiculous. And he has that right to feel like that. And I told him, yes, puppy, but that's where we are in education. And he's an old school, uh, hardworking Mexican machismo. And after he listens to the stories and uh, the he has his heart softens also to I'm so glad he has a safe place to learn. And but we teach the respect to authenticity, right? Don't be afraid to be who you are and what you are, and we share life.
Doctor, I just want to say that thank you for sharing that, because as someone who is a gay man who is happily engaged, it's emotional, because it's great to know that there's educators like you, and how you described your husband being very old school, how he's also trying to reach them before he teaches them. And in a sense, you both have complemented each other, as he's learned from your background, as far as the students that you have seen, the boy with the painted nails, then that could be a son of yours. That could be anyone's son. And also my condolences to the loss of a loved one, to your sister. As someone who has lost, two loved ones of mine, and you know this more than anyone. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we Dr. Contreras and I have come a long way, and knowing each other professionally, and she's a very good colleague and friend of mine. But with that being said, I resonate with that pain, and so this time of year is tougher than usual, but we still make the most of it to enjoy and to reflect and to and to be fruitful in these moments. So thank you for sharing that. And the love that you and your family have for one another, the love that you have, the overprotection and love that you have for your partner, yourself, doctor, I can only imagine, because it is a tough, public education is tough in itself, and then now volunteering and teaching at a prison, you know we may laugh as teachers and say, oh, it's no different. That's the unfortunate truth, depending on where you are, depending on where you come from, you know but I just want to say kudos to you, and thank you for having that love for your husband, for your family, and for your career. Being your authentic self, I think, is a great way to build that foundation of communication. So thank you for that. This next one: how would you deal with a student or a mental health client who uses derogatory, racist, sexist, or homophobic slurs? I'm sure you're no stranger to either one of these, because of, as an administrator, especially in elementary school, you deal with incidents of bullying and, other dilemmas. How do you deal with these situations?
So first of all, when somebody comes to my office, a student that has been um, or is to be reprimanded for something of this capacity, generally they're going to come in either screaming some sort of profanities because they're pissed for being in trouble, which is normal, okay, or they're going to be crying hysterically. So either one, when emotions are high, thinking is low, and I can't talk to you like that. So I sit them at a table and I let them know, when you're done kicking, farting, screaming, whatever your problem is, let me know so we can talk. And I pretend to work at my desk. And I'm really not doing anything, maybe deleting like junk mail, but I'm really not doing anything intense. If the crying continues, I'll stand up and courteously go put a box of Kleenex there in case you need it. And I walk away. I said, but I don't talk to anybody at that level of emotion because it's not safe for you or me. So we won't do that right now. And I just stay calm and I wait for them to calm down. Once we calm down, I always ask the same question, why are you here? I just need to know what happened, and you're going to have a perspective. Why are you here? Depending on the severity, I might ask them to sit in another room while I collect witness statements or help me to understand the whole picture, right? Before I can even intervene, let me understand the whole story, because generally the person that is doing this isn't aware of how the other person is feeling. So let me figure this out, right? So I really get to the core of what happened. Then I will talk to that student again. Okay, now I have a better understanding. Thank you so much. Sometimes I have to go look at cameras and see how people, like even the mannerism in which people were speaking to one another. So I do that. If it comes to just plain gross vulgarity, right? Like you're just, then I have the child say to me what happened. On the very first time, we're going to do the reteach, right? I need to teach your replacement behavior. We need to talk about why that's not acceptable. And I try to make a connection with the child, right? Unfortunately, in the day and age that we live in, I don't know if you watch public television, I don't know if you listen to the radio, but half the things that are said out there are so crude that you can't blame these children. They're bombarded. Look at a TikTok, look at whatever, and they're talking about your mother's whatever, and F the whatever, and this and whatever. So they're numb, right? Like they don't feel it anymore. And so then having to go back to in this school building, right? As for me and my house, in here, we don't do that. So I have to be respectful of that too. If they're overexposed to things like that, they really truly don't understand that content, or they don't understand the verbiage that came out of their mouth. So the first time is going to be a warning. Replacement behaviors, trying to help them understand expectations for here, and this system in which you live. Again, some of it is at home, right? Like you talk to a parent and every other word out of their mouth is vulgarity. So you're like, oh, okay, like now I understand. Okay, so then we have to go back to, as for me in my house, right? When you're at Nixon and here, these are the expectations. So I have to give the opportunity to reteach. Now, if you are a repeat offender, you've just decided that to carry on with this vulgarity, and you could basically not heed any of my recommendation or give me the finger. It's basically what you're telling me. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and this is what I think. The second time that you're in my office, I'll ask you what happened. I'll look into it again. If I find out that it's the same thing, after the first time you came to my office, I make a courtesy phone call to parents, because nobody wants to talk to their kid at the end of the day and say, hey, how was your day? I was in the principal's office. But you never heard from me, right? That's really going to infuriate a parent. So I make that courtesy phone call. Hey, I talked to Johnny today. Just want to let you know this and this and this happened. I told him that's not okay here. That's usually when I told you I'm going to hear from that parent every vulgarity out of their mouth. And I'm like, okay, that's why. Or this is what leads us to this, or what's wrong with calling somebody, whatever. If they were acting like okay, ma'am, never mind. But at least I've had that communication with you. The second time that you're in my office, it's for that same thing. They're usually able to articulate to me what they did and why they're not supposed to be doing that. But I don't leave it there. So then I call the parent on speakerphone and I tell them, Mrs. So-and-so, do you have a minute? I have so-and-so here in my office. Or Mr. So-and-so, do you have a minute? I have so-and-so here in my office. Usually they're going to tell me yes, because of who I am and the title that I carry. And then I say, you know what? I didn't do anything wrong today. So student, please let your parent know what happened today. When that child is now accountable and has to verbalize, a whole shift happens. Because why in the world am I going to be explaining something you did? You see the lump in the throat, you see the, because they have this feeling of overwhelmed disappointment, not only in themselves, they already knew better, and they did it anyways. And generally, I will tell you, unless there is a more severe disability, that nips that in the bud, because now they've had to articulate to their parent, here is what I did, or what I continue to call this group of girls the B word. Um, and I'm having to call you in the middle of your workday, and then I will tell them, with their parent there on the phone, and what are we going to do to fix this? And we've already agreed upon an apology letter or some restorative practice, because replacements have already been taught. So now I've got to restore relationships. And so then that child needs to articulate to the parent how they're going to restore the relationship, with whoever, whatever the situation is. And that accountability in and of itself, I don't own the problem anymore. That child has to own the problem and the restoration. I just facilitate those conversations. Generally gives us the home run hit, and that'll be the end of that problem.
So you touched on a lot of important details as an administrator from handling a situation with students, but how different now we're going to see how different it is with your faculty and staff. How have you handled the situation when a colleague was not accepting of others' diversity?
Uh, I haven't seen that on campus. When you come new to a campus as an administrator, there's always going to be some pushback. So as I said, I've only been here, this will be 2 years at the end of January. And definitely the pushback is going to be against new administration. Okay, because it's hard and change is hard. And so it's not a lack of support or diversity within themselves, but the pushback against, I don't have to follow that little lady, and or I, that those personalities on a campus that say, oh, I've lived already X amount of administrators here, I'm not worried about what you have to say. So there was an individual who was more vocal about that. One, there was a diversity in age. This person felt like, oh, she's way too young to be the boss of me, right? You're my elder, and I need to be respectful of that, which I understand. But this person was very vocal, to the point that the other person said this person creates a hostile work environment, constantly being anti the new administration and what have you. And so in the beginning, I just observed. And I collected the concerns. And I would encourage the person to talk to the other individual, because really that's your problem, man, because this person doesn't have the courage to tell me, so I don't have a problem. And maybe that's a little arrogant and selfish, right? But out of sight, out of mind. I don't know, you have a problem with me, whatever. Things to do. But as you were continue to create what now this person was referencing as a hostile work environment, about 1.5 years into it, I said, I need to do something, because it's not fair to that person either, and I have to protect them. So I prayed about it, and I prayed for the right time to talk to that other person. And I went one morning. The person got there early, like around 7:15, and I was already there about 7. And I heard their voice, and I gave them a minute to walk to their hall, because that's one of my pet peeves in life. If I'm just walking in with my bags, just give me a minute. Stuff down. So I gave the person a minute. And I went down to the classroom and knocked on the door and said, can I have a minute? And I sat down. I was very careful about even my body posture and everything. And then I said, I am not sure where our relationship went left. but I want to know what you need from me so we can do the best that we can for kids. Because I think at the heart of it, you and I have the same passion and the same desire. But for some reason, and I shared some of the examples that this other person had shared with me that created what the person referenced as a hostile work environment. I didn't use that term because it's harsh, but I said these are concerns that are being brought to me. I did share that I was disappointed that they didn't feel like they could come to them themselves. But again, put the onus back on the individual that had the problem that was so animate, and like, you're going to have to own that problem. I can't own that for you. So I don't know. I guess the diversity was in me, and but other than that, working relationships on the campus, I usually don't see that, or I don't hear that. But if I did, we would go back to communication and back to what do we do to have a conducive working relationship that keeps the goals of the organization and the team as the priority. Because you don't have to like everybody. You don't have to kumbaya with everybody. We don't have to share a meal together. But we do have to accomplish the goals of our students together. And so if there's something hindering us from doing that, what do we need to do to get past that? And sometimes as an administrator, you see those teams and you might have to move some people around the next year. Like, that's just not going to fly. It's not going to, we can't keep doing the same old thing. And that's okay too. But those are critical administrative decisions that are made and not made lightly.
Thank you for sharing that, because I know that it's a very taxing duty, because you just want to make sure that everyone, your staff in itself, is also feeling safe and that they are authentic in themselves. But that personal testament that you shared regarding, the difference in age and, where is this relationship going to go as far as, being colleagues, and one person being supervisor, the other one being supervised. So I really do appreciate you sharing that. We are almost done, doctor. We are almost done. What have you done to further your knowledge about diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what have you done for your teachers and colleagues to further their knowledge about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So I definitely think through my university studies, right? There's always a class in there. There's always, I know in the doctoral program, we took a course, and Dr. Martinez continued to ask us, are you Latina? Are you Chicano? Are you, and there were all these words. And I remember always sitting in class and like really not being able, reading books that she had, or readings that she had for us, and never being able to connect to any of it. So finally, I mean, because I didn't have that experience, and I would read about it or hear, and she kept on pushing of, and what is your identity? And so finally, that was it. One night, after a long day in a late class, driving home, I called my dad, who goes to bed at 8, but it was probably 9 something. Like, no, you need to wake up. This is a wake up. And so he answered the phone, and I said, what am I? Am I Latina? Am I Chicana? Am I? I started naming all these labels. And he says, you are nothing, little girl. You are American. What? That was so disappointing. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he says, kiddo, it wasn't, we are generations into, he goes, understand, it wasn't your grandparents' parents, but their parents who came from Mexico. And so many generations later, that's not even something that we identify with. We're blessed. Your grandfather wanted us to know that we're blessed to be in the country, but it's not a spot that we had to earn or fight for. That our family took care of that a long time ago. We're Americans, and I did not raise you around that. We weren't fighting any political causes. Where he says, as my exposure to travel out of town and feel some racism in other places, but raising you here in El Paso, you were never going to experience that. So I knew you were safe here, and we just identified as American because I raised you in a safe community. Oh man, what a relief. I was like, okay, now I can understand that. It opened my eyes to then be more aware of what those different titles were and identities were advocating for. Um, it made me more comfortable in my own skin to understand why I didn't have that identity. Um, so, with my staff, um, we talk about how students identify, right? I've shared that story with my staff so they know and understand where I come from. And again, we try to do uh, those awareness activities, whether it's through the books of the month, through other activities, through the support of our international students, through things that are important to them, right? You do the potlucks, and although we have pancakes and bacon, we also have grits because I do have some teachers that make and eat that. So that's interesting, right? Things that are different. But we embrace our differences. Um, and so really just the celebration and the diversity and wanting to learn from one another, and perhaps creating conversations or activities that team building activities that are going to allow for that to come out naturally, right? Um, Not always this set of prescriptive conversations. I know my counselor is really good too when she's building, supporting PBIS practices and SEL more so practices, talking about different needs that people have. We also have to recognize the way that we were disciplined, because you're going to discipline students now and you're not in the moment, like I said, when emotions are high, thinking as though, and you revert back to what you know, right? So like some people could be yelling at a student and they don't even realize it, but because they feel offended and they're so wrapped up in emotion, you accidentally took something personally. And that's a real hard part in this job, when a child does something or says something to you that, oh, dude, they're not talking to me, you're just upset about something. But if you take it personally because you've been with the damn kid for 6 hours a day and then you snapped back, right? Because I'm about to lose my with you. You're going to fall back perhaps on ways that you were raised. And so, not that that was a bad thing, but that's not an appropriate thing as a teacher in an education building, right? Where my father would have said, just sit down and shut the hell up. Okay. You're going to tell a child that. So you have to, okay, let me keep my composure and keep my professionalism. And you know what? It's okay to say, I need a timeout from you. It's okay to walk away from a child who is yelling and disrespecting you, because I'm not going to engage in that conversation. But we can't tell them, just sit down and shut the hell up. That doesn't work. And so being cognizant of our own biases or our own experiences that can then impact how we conduct ourselves as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that, especially with connecting, your academic experience with your personal experience, and you calling your father and say, "What the heck am I?" And so then when we talk about different parenting styles, different styles that shaped us, it's very, very interesting because there's a lot of animosity that parents have toward new practices, not just parental, but instructional, and saying, well, that's not how I was raised, or that's not how we did it back in the day. And, so if you're set in your ways, no matter what age you are, it's going to be hard to acclimate and to understand. But I know many parents are willing to learn and many teachers also are willing to learn as well. And, talk about keeping yourself composed, um, yeah. Have you or your school included diversity training in your professional development, or is that training? Do you have a say in that training, doctor, or is that mostly enforced by district?
Yeah, most of that comes from district. I would say, if anything, that would be through the counseling department, and then that will be rolled out by the counselor. Like I said, some awareness, but not huge. And then my role would be the supportive implementation, right? Making sure that we're following through with those things. But I haven't really seen a lot of it per se. I'm probably just having the conversation with you, right? My mind's always growing of what can we do better? Where can we do better for our kids? Finding ways to talk about that again. You heard I have a high population of white teachers. That's true. And their approach with the economically disadvantaged Hispanic student. If you haven't walked a mile in that shoe, you just don't know, right? You can't pretend to be something you're not or you haven't experienced. So you have to at least be aware of the different experiences. I will tell you, at 8 years old, my mother left me with my father, and they divorced. And so I know that feeling of rejection. I know that feeling of, how would you not want me? Like, that's crazy. So then when I have kids who don't have a mom or were left by a mom, or, oh no, I feel you, right? Where if you haven't lived that experience, I don't know that feeling. No, I do know that feeling. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't. But understand that you're still worthy. You're still worthy and wanted and loved, and the right women will come across your path and be that for you, and it'll change how you parent. But you have to also be aware that every year you're going to have 22, 24 new students in your class, and you won't be able to share each story. But do you know the story? And are you at least trying to understand that there is a story outside of curriculum that needs to be taught?
Thank you for sharing that, doctor. And my condolences to that personal experience that you shared regarding your mom and dad's divorce. But your father and your family did a really great job in raising strong women and strong individuals. And it takes a person of strength to be a school administrator. So,
Yeah.
let's see. Have you implemented what you've learned from any diversity training workshops, professional developments, or courses? And I know these questions may sound a bit repetitive, because you've been answering them very, very graciously, and I really do appreciate that, because these are very multifaceted questions. But yeah, I know you mentioned how district doesn't really go into specifics when it comes to diversity, but they do go into specifics in social and emotional learning. So if you would you like to elaborate on the SEL approaches and how that could be complemented with a conversation of diversity and equity, and how to implement that at your campus?
Absolutely. So in regards to social emotional awareness, we talk about creating class expectations with our children. We call them community agreements. We agree to give this in this particular setting, and we agree that we need this. There's a duck from other from the other people in our surroundings. We also talk about feelings. We talk about identities. We talk about our differences and our similarities, right? I know one of the things that I have, like, it's okay to say, not today. Like, you're not a bad person to tell somebody, I'm not going to deal with this today, or I don't want to be around you today. More so in my little girls, that's way harder. They take it personal, right? Like if they're crushed and nobody wants to be my friend is the response you're going to hear from the other one. But what if somebody is a bit much for you? And rather than creating an escalated experience, I just say, I need a break from you today. I know, again, back to social emotional awareness, I have a student in a behavioral classroom who wanted to clean up the materials at lunchtime to receive a Coyote cash or $1 because we have a Coyote store. And she wanted to do it by herself because she wanted to get the dollars. And so some other people were trying to help. And so she punched because she wanted to clean them all up and get all the dollars. She was trying to cash out for a movie, which all made sense to me. So when she punched, she got in trouble, ran away, and comes to the office demanding to speak to me. And that might be strange on some campuses, but my students know they have access to me. And so I absolutely, if I'm not there, my secretary knows to call me on the radio, especially for an escalated student. I will be right there. And so she comes in and she's puffing and puffing and she explains the situation to me. And then I said, oh yeah, sometimes I wanted to punch people too around here. And she just completely stopped and looked at me like, what in the heck did you just say? And I said, yeah, people upset me and sometimes I just want to punch them too. I understand that feeling. And then she says, okay, she took a deep breath and she calmed down and she says, you know what, Dr. C, maybe they were just trying to help pick up too, because if they help pick up, we'd pick up faster. But if they got $1, would I get $1 too? And I said, I think so, but I'd have to talk to the coaches because I'm not out there giving the dollars, but that would sound like the right thing to do, that everybody who cleaned up got $1. Were you trying to get more dollars? And then she says, well, maybe I just wanted all the dollars. And then I go, okay, so what could you do to earn more than $1 or somewhere else? And so we talked about that. And then now we were in dialogue, right? We were able to talk about this feeling that you had. And again, I don't know, maybe there are kids in the world that don't think about punching somebody or people. But as we had the conversation, I said, let's go back to that idea of what to do when we feel like you want to hit somebody. I said, when I go to the grocery store, the one thing that'll get on my nerve is when the lady's so busy with her children and she hits me with the cart in the back of the ankle. Oh, golly, that really makes me mad and it hurts. I go, that lady, I want to punch. I said, why shouldn't I punch the lady at the Walmart? Dr. C, you'll get arrested. I said, well, thanks for letting me know. And I said, yeah, I've never punched her. I just push her cart back a little bit and I say, can I have some space? I said, but because I got hurt, it makes me upset. So talking about the real feeling, right? But then you also have to remember that this particular student has trouble, right, with emotion. And what do you call emotionally disturbed? When I have a feeling and I act on that feeling impulsively. For me, that was a huge win then we had to talk about how to restore a relationship with these people that we hit later. But being able to relate to that feeling for her, and you're not a bad person because you feel like that, because we all feel these things and these feelings. But I have to control the response to the feeling, and how do I do that? And then with that feeling, how do you get what you need, right? Or what you feel that you need. Sharing at our, we have a team meeting with the counselor and the AP, because she takes care of more discipline than I do. But we go in there and we report on how many discipline infractions have occurred. We report on the demographics, right? How many are boys versus girls? How many were the different Hispanic boys? Is it when are these things happening? Is it the recess, unstructured play? Is it having those conversations so that we know where to create either more monitoring, more intervention, preparing for those conversations with those kiddos? Why is this? The basketball games, those were getting heated. And then when I was watching the boys play, I was like, oh no, you're learning this somewhere, right? This, like, we ran into each other and what the F, bro? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what is that? And like, you even, your vocabulary even changes. Like, you don't answer your teacher like that in class. Like, where did you even get that accent? What is that? Like, right? Because I have to get tough now, right? And it's just strange, right? And then, like, when they come into my office and I like, and I try to use that voice, and not that I'm very good at it, but they look at me like, and I go, yeah, you see, Dr. C, she's just the same all the time. Like, I don't have a bruh basketball voice. It's just me. Like, why can't you just be you and play the basketball game without all that? And then I learned for one of my other little boys, yeah, I went and did a home visit and realized the whole house is teenage African American boys. And they do talk about their balls, and they do talk about, like, he's exposed to that all the time, right? And people, so the conversation goes like that. But he had learned, I kid was so GT because he had learned the basketball court meant I talk and behave like this, but when I get into class, I talk and behave like this. And then when I pointed out to him at 6, he was like, yeah, I do. And why is that a different setting for a different behavior? And again, I won't say the name of the student, but I asked, and who are you? Are you that 6-year-old kid in the classroom? Or are you this bruh on the basketball court? Like, because you're always going to be fighting both of those identities. And what it was hard for the mom, because she was very protective. He was the baby. And I said, yeah, as a parent of 5 girls, you're right. My baby, she's totally different than my 31-year-old. My 16-year-old is treated very differently, because we have more and we can do more, and life is a little more stable. But helping them find identity is huge. And not that the older boys were wrong. They're just teenagers in and of their own right, but maybe helping them to be aware of the role model, because they're still the innocence of a 6-year-old at your table, gentlemen. And what do you want for your brother? And I'm not saying you want him to be weak or you want him to be meek. But if he is a representation of you, like, is this what we want? And as a family, are we protecting the innocence still of, hey, dude, we have a 6-year-old here with us, and let's be respectful of that. And so when occurrences happen like that on a campus, we do take them back to faculty meetings. We take them back to those areas to talk about that and where these behaviors come from. I will tell you, particularly that little boy in class and during regular class time said something about his penis, and that totally threw the teacher off the end. And I said, please, because your reaction is huge, and I'm currently working with this family on that. You're right, probably in their home. And the mom was very defensive of, well, that is the terminology for it. Yes, ma'am, but whatever is between anybody's legs, I don't want to talk about that here. Like, this is not the right setting for any of that. That's a very private matter, and what have you. But our reaction to those kind of things is huge, and again, the overexposure of children to all of these things is unfortunate. But we have to create a safe space for kids.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you know, as a new teacher, I have not heard of I have yet to deal with situations like that yet. Yeah, it will happen. Yeah. um, but but I will say when I was an instructional aide for a self-contained unit, you know, I thought I heard it all at the moment, you know, being cussed out, being called every name you can think of. But you learn not to take it personal because, you know, it's again, it all is about communication and them not being able to communicate how we are able to at a capacity. Um, so your talk about SEL is very important, and you know I really do appreciate you incorporating that with the conversation of implementing diversity, because I know the district doesn't really talk much about it, like you have said. But with the topic of SEL, it can incorporate that, it because every you know dealing with everyone's unique circumstances. That individual, that young man that you were talking about, you know, saying that terminology, saying that vulgarity, you know, to talk about, oh, this association from the basketball court, and then he's a different person in the classroom. Well, at least he knows a thing or two about filter, but still, you know. So it's a perfect example of focusing on the strengths rather than the weaknesses. It's like, okay, he's not necessarily being rude per se. He used the correct medical terminology, the anatomy of that male uh or part, but not there's a time and place for everything. And so I loved how you touched on that. My professor's gonna have a hoot when he hears this. He is. He is. What steps would you take to create a school climate that is supportive, respectful, and values differing perspectives and experiences? I think with all due respect, Doctor, before if you don't mind, I want to kind of answer this for you, and then you could expand on it, because um, this entire conversation, you've talked about the steps you have taken to of these supports, of being respectful, and the values of differing perspective and experiences. Before I move forward, do you want to add on to that question, and or to whatever you expressed earlier?
No, I think again, I mean, we have a military family awareness night. We have things that we do to support that part of our community. Our counselor meets with small groups of parents who are, or families who are currently going or have gone through divorce. We Again, as I told you, families with more economic challenges, we find ways to provide resources for them. We have small groups for students that are being raised by others besides their family, right? I have right now groups of students who are my older group of students who have lost a parent, and they meet in a small group. But I have a group of kindergartners. I have a kindergarten class where 3 of the students have lost at least one parent. And they're all in there together. And so for that group, it's more about their play together, but play-based counseling. where they just come in and again, they have the houses and the dolls and really trying to see how they're coping with that because they're little still. So again, there's lots of supports and programming and things that we're doing. What I can tell you, the notion is I don't do it by myself. Like it takes a really good team and people that are aware of those things. And, you know, whenever my team says, hey, Dr. C, what do you need from me? Or what, just be real strong at wherever you are. Wherever you are, be a home run hit for kids. And as long as everybody's being a home run hit and you have an off day, that's okay because you're human too. But be a home run hit for kiddos. And, you know, we're always looking to what else could we do? Is there something else that we're missing? So we have a 9 weeks awards assembly. And then one of my teachers was telling me, yeah, but what about the kid that perhaps isn't as academically astute, but goes above and beyond social emotionally, you know, that kid that's always looking out for somebody. So they created an award and explained it to kids and titled it that. So usually when people come to me with things like that, I'm going to hear you out and I'm happy to support that, but I'm going to give you the blessing, run with it because I can't do it all. I was like, I'm just one person and I get tired and I run out of energy also, but I'm going to support whatever you need. I had another teacher that says, we need a Zen space. Okay, let me identify the space, but you're going to have to run with it. And she's getting a donation of a sofa and they want to paint them, knock yourself out. Because that's what they need, right? Of course, you have the naysayers that said, with what time can we freaking Zen around here? You know how busy our lives are. And I'm like, girl, if they need a Zen room, they're getting a Zen room. But just don't ask me to do it. I don't have time. So really everything that is out to meet the needs of people, it takes a team. And then for me, it's the follow-up to support and to help support these things.
Thank you so much for that, doctor, especially with the Zen part. Yeah, there's always the naysayers. There's always the naysayers. All right, 3 questions left. How would you measure the success of this objective and or initiative? And I think it's talking more about creating a school climate that is supportive, respectful, and values of just differing perspectives and experiences. How would you measure the success of this objective and or initiative?
One is you go see it. You have to inspect what you expect, right? You have to be out there. You have to be in the field. You have to, let me go see how the Zen room is working. Let me go check out the small groups. I'm not afraid to sit down and be a part of that play-based group. I don't have the counseling experience. When I ask my counselor, what are you looking for? Like, help me to understand. I am going to be in everything and see everything. I am going to do the learning walks with my team. I am going to go out to that basketball game that I'm trying to figure out what's going on. You have to be there. You have to live in and be a part of it. 2, you have to not be afraid to ask for feedback. Right? So you have to ask those people that are living the systems and implementing the systems and practicing the SEL, how is it going? What can we do better? What else do you need to support? What are you still not understanding? What's not working for you? How come that common corner isn't working for you? And then with the feedback, you need to be ready to either change an approach or practice, provide another resource, provide, sometimes we have after school trainings, but they're just on an as needed basis, right? Teachers that are hesitant about student-led conferences coming in February. So, okay, let's have some after school training for that, but it's not necessary for everybody, but for those who are needing that support. So first you inspect what you expect, and then 2, you ask for feedback. You ask for, and you really, it's more than for my T-test goals or T-PEST goals, but the surveys are really to collect information to change and do better by practice. And again, when you can model that as a campus administrator, because you're expecting teachers to change practice, right? We're always wanting to grow and change and do better, but if they don't see that in you, they're more hesitant also. And so you want to model that growth mindset for them.
Practices and outcomes related to diversity and inclusion are vital measures of institutional excellence. How would you support creating a culture of organizational learning and continuous improvement at the faculty level?
So definitely bringing those things to one, a faculty meeting, two, and then in those smaller groups, again, in our SPED meetings, what is this population's needs? And talking about that at your PLCs. Although the majority of those meetings are driven by academic success and academic data measures of success, there have to be meetings where we just are able to talk about how kids are doing outside of academics. Again, creating that dialogue, and then once you have the information, asking, what are we doing? What's the plan? Like, how are we meeting those needs? Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that, Doctor. And last one, based on the current political, social, racial, economic climate in the nation, do you feel that something could be done to change the current situation? If so, what changes would you suggest?
I just think the answer to everything, Nelson, is love. Like, we just have to learn to love each other again. And I think that part of everything that's gone awry is because people don't even love themselves. A lot of people don't even like themselves. So one, you have to have some self-identity and be comfortable in your own skin, and treat yourself courteously and give yourself grace, and conduct yourself with integrity, but truly love who you are, and those things that you think, I could do better by that, right? Love yourself enough to do better, to learn better, to know more. And then when you can get some things right with yourself, you're ready now to give and model to others. At the end of the announcements this year, I say, one of the things I always say is, make it a great day. The choice is yours. Like, you have the power to make the day. But recently I added, and if nobody tells you today, boys and girls and faculty and staff, Dr. Contreras loves you, because there's just too many people in the world that don't hear it. And that's not okay. You want to know that you're cared about. You want to know that you belong. You want to know that you're a part of something that matters. And I just think if people had more love, and then, of course, after the first faculty meeting, after I was saying it a couple of weeks, because I thought, oh, somebody's going to call their union on me, right? I just said, please know that when I say that, I'm not in love with you like I am in love with Mr. Contreras, but I love you. Like, I truly, truly care about you and your growth and your well-being, and I want to know that you leave here with a peace of mind, and you come every day ready to give kids your best. Like, I just think, Nelson, we need to learn to love purely again, and to model that, like, when you truly are invested and care about people, more than numbers, and more than if we could learn just to love each other again, it would be a better place for everybody.
You know what, Doctor? I say the same thing. I always say, if nobody told you that they loved you today, you know I do. Like, it's crazy. And what a full circle moment. I more than likely I'll look back on this conversation and in my archives I'll go on ahead and look through it, and I'll say, you know what, my dissertation, and sometime in the near future, I'll base it on love, because as educators, that's what we want our students to be loved and respected, because these are the ones that are going to lead, and we want them to lead, whether in their communities, whether in their jobs, whether in their families, whether in the country as a whole. You know, we want them to lead, and that contributes to a diversified community that seeks belonging. And so I really do appreciate that. But I'm going to go on ahead and start the recording right now. Thank you so much, Dr. C, for your awesome impact, your expertise, and your professionalism, and taking so much investment and time out of your day to interview with me. I really do appreciate it. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for for watching this interview. And we hope that we enlightened you with a lot of information. Until then.